Okay, I think it's time to get started. Thanks everyone for joining on a Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. So today we're going to talk about data science resume interview. So hopefully some of the tips I share will be useful for you when you start to apply for data science jobs down the road. Let's get started. Uh, First of all, a quick mention of WeCloudData's Data Science Bootcamp. It comes in two different formats. We have full-time bootcamp and as well as part-time bootcamp. The full-time bootcamp is a diploma program, and it's 3 months, a typical 12 to 14 week bootcamp. It includes the portfolio project building, and WeCloudData also include the real client project opportunity in this program, so students get to work with real clients to build up their industry experience. We also provide 6 months of one-on-one career mentorship, so students or graduates will be working with a data scientist to prepare for their career. And in terms of the curriculum, we cover SQL, Python, data science skills. We cover a lot of machine learning. And one of the highlights of the program is actually big data. So we cover Amazon Web Services, how to work with different managed service, and also how to work with Apache Spark to scale your data science solution, and then portfolio projects. And then we do real client projects for about 6 months. Students work on these projects as they build up their industry experience. At the same time, they'll be working with their mentors and work on job search. So that's the full-time data science bootcamp. We also have a part-time bootcamp. It lasts for 6 months. It's good for work professionals who cannot really quit their job to join the data science bootcamp. So it's more flexible. And then the real client project part is optional because a lot of our students in the part-time program, they don't have the time to commit to real projects, but it's optional if you think you can find the time to commit to real projects, and everything else will be the same. So the duration is a bit longer. There's a question about the recording. The recording will be shared. You can go to youtube.com/@WeCloudData, and then you'll be able to find all the event recordings in the future. Okay. So in terms of the schedule, we're starting a part-time data science bootcamp on March 27th on the West Coast, and our Eastern Coast bootcamps will be starting in April and May as well. All right, let's jump into the data science resume and interview tips discussion today. So first of all, I would like to discuss how to structure your resume. So, okay, if you take a look at the job applicants, right, in the job market, and typically for career switchers and people who are just starting out, when you look at their resume, there are three different types, right? This is a very typical example. For example, this is a new grad, basically, who has a lot of academic experience, has very limited work experience, right? They have really good grades, went to great school, but they don't have work experience. A second type is someone who has work experience for years, but because they're switching to data science, they don't really have relevant work experience. So these are very typical career switchers who has little analytics background. But we also have work professionals who has experience in data analytics, but maybe not in data science, right? These are people from BI and data analytics background who would like to work in machine learning and data science. So these are data professionals, and then they're mainly just looking for upskilling opportunities and then find a better job. So what's the best way to structure your resume? And of course, it depends on your background. But let's talk about the structure. So these are the two structure that I find very common, right? On the left hand side, it's a row based structure, and on the right hand side, it's column based. So we have two columns. I personally like the one on the left hand side. It's just easy and it's straightforward. But I think the layout on the right-hand side, some people might find it a little bit more appealing because the one on the left-hand side is very common. I don't know, maybe 80-90% of the resume is using the one on the left-hand side. But I think it's what the content, right, that matters. So let's talk about them, and feel free to ask questions, if you have them along the way. You need to have some major sections, right? Of course, you need to have name and contact information. I would recommend to put key skills on the top, followed by experience. A lot of candidates would like to put some sort of summary, but I think in general, a one-page resume is preferred, unless you have a lot of relevant experience, right? If you're switching career, I think one page is probably the best option. And so in that case, the screen real estate is very important. I don't think a summary is necessary. But of course, if you can find, the enough space to fit in, the summary, by all means. But the key skills and experience is basically the summary because it's only one page, right? And I found that as a hiring manager myself, I've reviewed a lot of resumes. I rarely look at, the summary, because I usually know what I'm looking for. So it's either someone who has the right machine learning skills or someone who has the right experience. So I would typically skip that part. And some people will ask about, do I need to write a longer summary, right, to introduce myself, like a cover letter? I think it doesn't hurt to have one, right? If people look at it, that's great. But most of the time, I think employers will probably not be looking at it as well. So I think you just need to focus on just writing a very well structured and very informative, resume. I'll talk about how to structure that. And then I think for anyone who's looking for data science, data engineering related jobs, you need to have some sort of projects, right? Whether it's portfolio projects or academic projects. But having project is usually telling the employers that you have, the right experience. If you're a career switcher, your experience may not be directly related to data science. So in this case, the project experience is actually more important than your current job or previous job. And then, of course, you cannot skip the education part. So this is a very high level structure. And on the right-hand side, this is, typically how people do that if they have two columns, right? So experience on the left part, and I think it really stands out. So in this case, I would also recommend it, and key skills on the right-hand side. It depends on your preference, and you can do a little bit A/B testing as well, I think. But I think the content itself matters more. Okay. Any questions regarding, the type of templates to choose or structure? By academic project, I mean, if you have done any, because you may have done a master's of data science or some sort of certification program from the college, then you can include, your whatever data related projects in the project section. But it definitely needs to be a data science related project. If it's not related, then it's a waste of space. Coming from academia, including your paper, I think that'll be helpful if it's related to things like machine learning, data science, and natural language processing. It absolutely helps, especially when you look for machine learning engineering or machine learning scientist jobs. I think having papers will be crucial, right? Okay, well, let's start from the top. For contact information, of course, first name, last name, your email or your phone number. Some people will put LinkedIn link. I think it's necessary. And the GitHub link will be helpful as well. We did some experiment because we work with a lot of students in our boot camp. And I noticed that like 10% of the time, people will click on it because you can, use a short URL. You can monitor that yourself, right? Don't put the raw link. For example, you can use a short URL with your name in it, and then then it will tell you like how many times people click on it. And I think it's about 10%. So it's still useful, right? And GitHub is very important because, you don't just list a bunch of bullet points describing what you did. People definitely will be interested in checking out the code, the actual project implementation, even though they don't have time to read your code in detail. But I think just browsing through what you've done and the way you document things will help a lot, from a hiring manager's perspective. Okay, key skills. The only two suggestions I have for key skills is however you structure it, like try to make it easy for the hiring managers to read. Because I've seen resumes that list, have a small bullet for each key skill, but then I got overwhelmed when I'm reading this kind of resume because, people sometimes list 30 different keywords. And it's not really so. My recommendation here is that you can put in a set of generic, right, key skills that are absolutely important for data science. And then you can add or remove, a couple of these bullets depending on the job posting. Because sometimes companies might be looking for very specific skills, right? And try to break it down into smaller, sections, such as programming, your analytics skills, ML skills, big data skills. And this will make it easy for the employers to read and understand, right? Because you maybe it reduced the response time by 1 second. I think that actually matters, right? Because hiring managers are always looking for specific skills, and if you have a big data section, they can just go right to the big data section and find the relevant skills, whether it's AWS, Apache, Spark. But when you have like 30 key skills or keywords, it's very overwhelming and it's kind of messy, right? And don't put too many keywords because sometimes it feels like you actually know more than the hiring manager. And then they will definitely want to see all of these relevant keywords in the experience section. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen people make is that you have 30 keywords in the key skill section, but when you talk about the relevance, relevant experience, we only find 5 keywords. So that means you're really just exaggerating your skills, or maybe you don't know how to write the resume. Okay, so that's key skills. And then of course, next we need to, I'm just going to elaborate on the key skill a little bit. For example, for data scientists, there are a lot of interesting keywords you can put on the resume. And most of the data scientists will tend to focus on machine learning. But I think, machine learning, classification, natural language processing, or maybe Kaggle projects, everybody have those keywords. So it doesn't really help you stand out. I think companies are increasingly looking for more well-rounded, data science candidates, people who also can show or demonstrate some engineering skills, such as working with a cloud platform, right? So on the infrastructure side, if you can show that you have some AWS knowledge, and you understand how to work with, Amazon S3 or some sort of, relational or NoSQL database, these will be helpful, right? And on the compute side, do you understand big data, right? Because Python, pandas, it's pretty standard. But many companies actually use a different programming tool in production because the raw data need to be pulled from Snowflake using SQL, or maybe you need to use Apache Spark to process the big data stored in Amazon S3 buckets, right? So in that case, showing some, big data skills such as, Apache Spark will definitely be helpful. And of course, PyTorch, TensorFlow, anything related to machine learning will be helpful as well. So keyword definitely matter. So as I said, if let's say there are 10 keywords, right, such as machine learning, Python, pandas, you absolutely need to put them on the resume, but it can remove and add keywords depending on the job posting. And I don't think that's a lot of work, right? And try to make it easy for people to read, and that will be very helpful. Okay. And in terms of the relevant experience, and I'm talking about this from a career switcher's perspective, or maybe you're a new grad, right? So you probably don't have, direct work experience in data science yet. And this is probably the most challenging part, right? Of writing a resume for from a career switcher's perspective. My recommendation here is that, well, whatever project you've done, right? If it's, closer to, so instead of putting work experience, just say it's relevant experience. And then your portfolio project sometimes can go under this section as well. But if it looks just like a Kaggle competition or Kaggle project, then it's not very convincing. So the way you tell the story, I think, is very important, right? But assume that you have some real or relevant, project experience. The way I would recommend it, how to write it is, you need to list the objective. Right? Don't make it sound very technical because, let's say I've seen a lot of students' resume that they just describe what they did. I used pandas to process data. I used scikit-learn to train a machine learning model. I tuned parameters, and this is not very helpful. I think to be able to show that you actually have experience, the experience the employers are looking for is not just how you work with the package, you know. So you need to, communicate the objective or the goal of the project. What are you trying to do in this project, or what did you get asked to do, right? And because in when you use this resume and you take it to an interview, people will ask you, right? And typically they ask you questions like, well, tell us about this project you've done, right? What were you trying to achieve in this project? And how big is the team? What was your contribution to this project, right? And then they'll ask you, what did you do? Like, which part did you implement? And then they'll go deeper and ask you more technical questions, right? And of course, having some sort of impact, is it, increasing the profit, or, or performance of the model, or, decrease some sort of runtime. These are all always helpful, right? So always start with, I think one bullet point should always be dedicated to the objective, right? What this project is about. And if you actually interact with people and different project teams and stakeholders, I think you need to somehow include that in your project, objective statement, telling people or giving people the signal that you actually interact with a business team. So you understand how to turn a business question, right, into actionable data insights or whatever, ML pipeline. So that is very important, and that is the experience, right? And then, of course, you need to talk about the implementation, what you actually did. Try to mention the skills applied, right? Whatever key skills you list in the key skills section, I think you need to mention a few of those keywords. Employers are always looking for relevant experience, right? So if you say that you have Spark experience, can you describe that in the project you did or in the portfolio project you did? And explaining the impact is obviously very important. And this part is also hard because sometimes a data science project may fail, and a lot of times, right? But you need to at least communicate the potential use case of your machine learning model or data science project, right? And if it's just a visualization dashboard, and it's kind of hard to say, with this dashboard we saved $30,000 for the client. But even saying that this is the very first, right, BI dashboard for this company, and that is impactful because that sort of, you're helping company to change their culture, because people will start to become more data driven. And people who actually work in this industry, they will understand that building the first dashboard is actually not easy, because you have to communicate a lot with the business. It's back and forth, and people will start by asking a lot of dumb questions. And after they've seen your dashboard, they actually, you're sort of helping them to understand the data and insight better. And in the future, they will start to ask more, or smarter questions. And these are actually very impactful. So I remember when I joined a startup a couple of years ago, I started as the first data scientist, and I worked with the head of data. And I thought I was joining as a data scientist to build machine learning models, but the first 6 months, I did no modeling at all. We were basically building data infrastructure, working with data ingestion, building data warehouse using Redshift, even built some chatbot. But when we built the first dashboard, right, for the entire company, everybody got wowed, and they start to ask you all kinds of questions. And then when you start to collect enough data and people start to ask, smarter questions, they would like to get more predictive. This is when you're going to actually start building machine learning models. But that 6 months was used to basically build the trust. And that was really important because now people will start to rely on you and you'll become more convincing. And it's easier for you to sell anything you would like to do. And a lot of times companies will depend on the data team to give them directions in terms of like what to do, right? You don't expect the business team to tell you, hey, we should build this machine learning models to solve this, but you have to explain and convince people. And to have that kind of influence, you sort of need to build the trust. And just starting with basic analytics is always very important, right? But of course, this is a small startup with 50 people, but working for a bigger company, maybe it's a different story. But, you know, uh, always be able to understand the business requirement, right? Being able to have some sort of impact and influence. And that is the experience I think employers will be looking for. Because there are a ton of data scientists or job applicants out there. Everyone's skilled nowadays, right? And tools are becoming easier and easier to work with. And now we have like ChatGPT, Copilot, Codex. I think just writing some boilerplate code is not hard at all, right? The tough part is how do you convince people to use your data science solution? And that requires a lot of communication. So even if you're just building your portfolio project, you don't actually interact with the business. You need to pretend that you're actually working with a real business, right? And then the way you describe your project will be very different. But definitely don't just list that, I use package A to do this. It's usually not very helpful, right? When you look at a senior data scientist resume, they're less likely to talk about like the tools, right? It's usually, the things they actually implement that has impact. So that would be my recommendation here. And, of course, if you don't have experience working with a real client, then you have to use the portfolio project, which is what we're going to talk about next. Okay. Regarding the real project, my recommendation for anyone who's just in a progress of job search is that you need to read more use cases or case study, right? Try to understand the business use cases of data science. What we're looking at right now is the customer life cycle. So if you work for retail, banking, or let's say telecom or insurance, right? These are companies that are B2C business. So they deal with customers. And of course, all of these companies will face customer acquisition challenge. When they acquire the customer will go through some sort of growth and they become mature. They have all of your products, and then eventually they'll cancel the product. Maybe they leave, right, for a better product. That's a typical customer life cycle. Along the way, you need to understand the data science use cases, right? What kind of machine learning solution or models we can build for customer acquisition. That's when the company has very little knowledge and data about the customer, right? So you can't really do a lot of machine learning models, but you can do segmentation, for example, right? And in the growth stage, it's all about cross-sell and upsell to increase the customer lifetime value, right? And then when the customer has pretty much have all of your products, then just keeping them happy for as long as possible. That's where personalization, right, loyalty programs become useful. So throughout this, there are a lot of models you can build, and I think you need to read a lot of use cases, and understand how to apply different models at different stage of customer life cycle. I think these are the context you need to have before you go for an interview with uh, a certain industry, right? Make sure you do your homework, and I think that's important, right? And once you have the real project, here's an example. This is I think this one follows a 2-column structure, right? So on the top left corner, that's the real project experience. That's actually an example of our student's resume. The student got a data scientist job right after graduation, right? I think partly because she has a PhD. What she struggled with was that she had a 2-year break after graduation, right? She got a PhD and then she had a baby. So she took care of the baby for 2 years. And then she actually came from like a stats and math background, so her background is really good. She's pretty good with R. She picked up Python and big data in the program, and then worked on some real client project. So in the blue box, that's the real client project that really helped her to gain, attention from employers. And then she also worked on some really interesting data science projects. And if you look at the title of her data science project, it has some sort of business context in it, right? Retail recommendation system. So my recommendation for a portfolio project, right, description, try to have a business context, right? And describe it in a way that it doesn't sound like a Kaggle project, right? There are a lot of great data sets and great business use cases on Kaggle. So the way you describe what you did is very important. Okay, don't make it sound very technical. Okay, so now let's talk about the portfolio project. And we have a lot of students who went to interviews, and the interviewers will ask them, well, tell me about this portfolio project you did. And a common question is that, well, why did you choose this project? So at that moment, I think the company know that the student probably don't have real experience, right? And but they think the skill sets are impressive, and that's why they're asking, like, why did you work on this project? Tell me your motivation, because everybody will say that I'm passionate about data science, and I do a lot of reading. I work on projects. Now the employers will be interested in, well, why do you pick this project? My recommendation would always be just pick the industry that you're interested in. Because you're interested in that, you'll do a lot of research. You tend to know more about the industry. And then that could be a good motivation, right? And then invest some time in writing a project summary. And after you implement the project, I would recommend not only uploading the code to GitHub, if you can, write a blog post and publish that on Medium, right? And write a story or post on LinkedIn as well. These will all help you build your personal branding. And as I said, about 10% of the time, employers will be clicking on that, and you would like to impress them with your project summary. And the project summary, also writing project summary also give you an opportunity to sort of just go through the process of describing what you've done. That's actually a preparation for interview, because during the interview, people will ask you what have you done, why you choose this project, and how did you implement the project, and you sort of have done that in in you know during the process of writing this blog post, right? So I think blog posts sometimes can help you a lot. One example I tend to give is we have a student who did some web scraping project, the Fishing Ontario, and then because they're interested in fishing, it's a team project. And then the student later got contacted by, I think, a startup, whatever, founder in Silicon Valley, and say, hey, would you like to have an interview? So I think that's, I think not a lot of people have done projects related to fishing because there might not be a lot of data sets available. So they scraped the data themselves and did a bunch of interesting visualization. It's not even a machine learning project, but that caught people's attention, right? So this is a portfolio project. And when you work on portfolio project, I describe that as end-to-end project, right? So definitely don't just download a data set from Kaggle and then train a bunch of models. That's not enough. I think a good project always has some sort of data collection piece, right? You're going to collect data, but you don't necessarily have to collect data from the source. But if you have some sort of CSV files, you can load that into a database, right? Because in real life, data scientists never upload a CSV file into their Python environment. It's usually pulled from the SQL environment. So data is stored in the relational database, or the data is stored in Amazon S3 buckets. So at least you will be working with some sort of packages to read the data, right? A lot of the heavy lifting data processing is actually done in database, such as Snowflake, right, or Amazon Redshift, or whatever data warehouse. because Python doesn't have the power to process big data, right? Or you can use PySpark, using Spark to process the data. I think employers will definitely appreciate the effort here. So even if you're not dealing with like really large data set, you're showing the effort and try to make your portfolio as close to the real life project as possible, right? So working on something end to end. So data collection, pre-processing, right? And then your data science and machine learning. And after you train the machine learning model, it will be great if you can deploy the model, but that touches a little bit on the machine learning engineering side. If you're not comfortable with that, I would recommend just build a dashboard to explain the model you've done. Even some sort of data profiling will be useful because I think data scientists always end up explaining the models to the business teams, right, or the product managers. So being able to interpret the model is important, and you can build some dashboard, and that also sort of showcase your visualization or dashboarding skills. It's important for data scientists as well, right? Or if you can deploy the model in Spark to do some sort of real-time inference, that would be pretty cool. Another example is, our student, when they work with text data, they'll index the text files in Elasticsearch database, and then they can build a search engine on top of it, to be used, to demonstrate the NLP project they've done. So that would be my recommendation here. Try to work on something that's end to end, so it has larger scope. Okay, and education. My recommendation is that don't put that on the top. You can always put education at the bottom if it's a one page, because unless I think companies, if they care about education, they always know where to find it. So it's not a big deal. And for companies that apply some sort of filters, they will always be able to find the keyword as well. So you don't have to put it on top to remind people. But things like certificate or boot camps will all be helpful, right? Especially when you actually don't come from a data or tech background. I think boot camp and certificate will definitely help. That shows the effort, right? But yeah, so these are my recommendation for how to structure your resume. I'll pause here and see if you guys have any questions before I move on to the next section. There was a question from Sandeep. How can new grads showcase that? Which one are you referring to? Is it the real project or the portfolio project part? Oh, the impact of the project. Yeah. So, if it's a portfolio project, and of course you don't work with a real company, then it's hard to showcase the impact. But I think at least you can describe how your model can be potentially used, right? So it's not real impact, but at least it shows that you understand how the model can be used. Okay. Any data science professional memberships to add? Um, I don't find this very popular, like IEEE, used by engineers, like in data science, maybe because it's not around for long enough. But even certifications in data science and data engineering jobs are not that useful, to be honest, because a lot of data scientists are self-trained. They've gone through some sort of informal training, right? Like boot camps, not necessarily like a university degree, because I think only in recent years universities start to offer like data science programs. And in the past, if you want to learn AWS and big data or Spark, there's no such training courses offered by universities. We start to see more, of course. So yeah, I think membership, certificate are not very, it's not that important for data science jobs. Can you give one example? An example of the project impact? Let's say if you work on a customer churn model, right? Data is you got the data from Kaggle, So you can describe like why you work on this, project. The motivation could be, uh, we're trying to understand customer life cycle, right? This can be used by the industry to reduce um, customer acquisition cost, or improve retention, which means reduce, um, to cut the loss, right? Or improve the company's bottom line. And then you build the model, right? Uh, let's say classification models to predict customer lifetime value, or predict customer churn. Uh, it will be great if you can have some sort of dashboard to explain your models, right? Now, you need to describe the insight, because you don't just say, oh, this model has an accuracy of 85%, because any model you train will have some sort of accuracy score. How would I know if 75% is great? Or sometimes when you say 95%, maybe other people can get 97%, right? So that doesn't give me much information. But if you can just describe that in a way that you find some really important variables, right? The important or the key features, and it needs to have some sort of business background, of course, right? So some variables, important variables you identify, you do some profiling, and then you can sort of quantify that. And I think that will be very important, because when you work with the business team to explain your churn models to them, they're always going to ask you, okay, so yeah, this model is great, but how do I use that? Can you tell me the three most important variables in your model? What are the most predictive features, right? Because from business perspective, their mindset is that, well, tell me well, your model is accurate, but what's leading to this, accurate model, right? The great performance. Is it because the customers, all of their friends are leaving? That's why they're leaving as well? Or is it because in the past 6 months, the customer sort of reduced their usage? Or maybe customer don't churn right away. They typically reduce the usage, or they had 3 products with the telecom, and then they canceled their internet first, and then they cancel their TV, right? So there are signals that you can use, and these are the signals that business will be interested in, because they can't just say, oh, these are the high risk customers, can we all give them 20% off? Then the company will lose a lot of money, right? So they're still going to take the model prediction score, and they're going to create some sort of segmentation. They will try to find, they need to create some sort of marketing campaign to retain these customers. And the reason that why they're asking, like, okay, tell me the most important variable, is because they want to understand how to write the message. The messaging is important. And the strategy, right? Should we give them discount? Should we just give them cash values, or do we give them some product, a new product for free usage for another 6 months? So that's why they need to understand this, right? So if you can explain some of these key insights you discover from the modeling process, and explain how that potentially can be used to reduce churn, right? Or improve retention, I think that would be very useful. And it sort of has more business context in it. But if you're just saying that I've done parameter tuning and it improved the model by 20%, that is still good, but simply describing the accuracy of the model is usually not very, impactful, right? How many technology terms, tools, metrics, models, and keywords, business impact ratio should the resume have? Um, Terminologies. I think for each project you list on your resume, you can list, the tools. I've seen resume where people actually for each project they did, let's say at company B, they actually have one line just to describe the tools they've used. And then they'll have like, I use Spark, I use Python, SQL. So, because the tools you use for different project may vary, right? So that's, I've seen this, a couple of times. I think that's useful as well. That sort of direct the employer's attention to the tools they've applied. Um, so that's, but you don't have to put too many keywords, I think. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so let's move on. Now, let's say you have a very, useful resume and you apply for jobs and you get interviews. Um, and then you need to prepare for the interview. Uh, so I think, we've seen a lot of tech job cuts, right, in the recent few months. I think throughout 2022. So that's unfortunate. But I think, so it's mainly the big tech that based on my observation, right? I haven't seen banks cutting a lot of jobs. So uh, the tech job cut may sound a little bit discouraging, but I think when you look at the this job market of data science or data scientist, um, not all jobs are from big tech companies, to be honest. There are way more jobs in the traditional businesses, right? So, but of course, there are applicants who only want to join the big tech companies, then maybe it's not the best time. But if you're just starting your data science career, I think joining, smaller startups, right, joining the traditional businesses, they're all going through digital transformation. There are a lot of opportunities for data science related work. So yeah, I think there's still a lot of opportunities out there, and this sector is definitely still growing. Um, so, um, but one thing I would like to, um, to share with you is that I think the recent tech job market is going to impact junior level jobs, right? Because this market right now is filled with a lot of very talented and experienced professionals who got laid off from big tech companies. So I think it will take a little while, at least a few months, for the market to absorb so many talents, right? So I think all of the recruiters' attention right now are on those those people. And when companies are having hiring freezes, or when they're cutting jobs, I think that sort of hurt the junior level positions. It'll be a little bit harder, and it's also more competitive. So be prepared for that. So the requirement at the bar might be a little bit higher. So there's not much we can do at this point, but the market will definitely bounce back. So all we can do is just get prepared, right, for the spring that will come eventually. And during this time, I think keep applying for jobs, and also at the same time, just keep working on projects. Try to learn, read more, right? Do more reading, read case studies, use cases, and try to upskill yourself. That's, I think, something I would recommend. When it comes to job search, my suggestions are, first of all, don't get discouraged if you don't hear back from the employers. Sometimes I think the job seekers tend to be, in a panic mode. If they apply for 20 jobs, they don't hear back. It is quite normal to not hear back if you only apply for 20 jobs, because it's way more competitive than you think. So keep applying. I think you need to apply for hundreds of jobs for sure, because you don't have a lot of leverage. The market has so many talented people right now, and the market need to absorb. So you definitely need to apply for more jobs, right? So spend more time on job search. It will pay you off. And the most important step in job search is that just knowing what's wrong, right? I know it's hard, but after you apply for, let's say, 100 jobs, they don't hear back, it's definitely the resume problem. It could be like not having enough experience on your resume, or not having the right keywords on your resume. But you will need to try your best to understand, like, what's the cause. So you can do a little bit A/B testing yourself. Like, let's say you have two versions of your resume, and you apply for 50 jobs using one version and another 50 jobs using another version. We can try different layout. You can try different way of describing the project. Or one approach is merging your portfolio projects into your experience, right? And the other version is separating them, right? See which one works better, right? I think 50 is good enough sample for you to tell which approach works a slightly better. And then also talk to experts, friends, ask people for their feedback on your resume if you're not hearing back, and find a mentor as well. So I think all of these will be helpful. But if you're not hearing back, it's definitely the resume issue, right? And so at the meantime, keep working on projects. I think eventually it'll work out. And don't apply too many filters yourself. I've seen our students being very restrictive about the type of jobs they apply for. But if you do that, just have a good reasonable expectation that you're not going to get a lot of interviews unless your background is really strong, right? um if you have tried and it's still hard to get an interview, I think maybe sometimes there are different ways to get to the destination. So maybe start looking for a data analytics job, right? You can apply for DS and DA jobs at the same time, and even try data engineering if you have relevant skills. And then you can become a data analyst first, and then move your way up to data science. That could be in a tough market. I think this could be a good option. But if when the market is really strong, like back in 2021, the job market was really good, then I usually recommend the student, like, you could have just waited 2 more months, but then you will get a data science job instead of, spending 6 to 12 months in a DA role and then apply for data science job, right? Um, but in a tough market, I would say just start applying for DA jobs and get as much experience, real experience as possible. All of these will help. Networking is very important, especially in the tough market. So working with recruiters and agencies, right? You'll have to learn or get comfortable pitching yourself to the recruiters, because recruiters typically work with experienced candidates, right? They usually recommend, only 2 to 3 candidates, right, to the company they work for a specific role. So they want to absolutely refer the best candidates. And because they are not data science hiring managers, it will be hard for them to tell who is actually better. So recruiters usually prefer candidates who have certain number of years of experience, right? That's how they tell who is more experienced, of course, like your education background, your work experience, the company have worked for, the years of experience. It's very hard for them to tell, like, based on the portfolio project you've done, how experienced you actually are, right? So you have to sort of know how to package yourself, and then send a strong message to the recruiter. So that's why building your personal branding is important on LinkedIn. Can you write some sort of like LinkedIn posts, and write some Medium blog post? I think all of these will be helpful. And recruiters nowadays will check out your GitHub as well. I don't think they understand exactly what you're doing, but having a GitHub also is useful because they know GitHub is important, right? Um, and try to do outreach on LinkedIn, and you know and again, don't get easily discouraged, because all of these hiring managers and recruiters are super busy. So they don't necessarily always respond to you quickly. And their message box inbox are probably filled with many requests. So in that case, just keep trying. There's so many recruiters and agencies out there. Even just, with the same company, you can talk to different recruiters, right? You never have to pay them, and just like make an intro, see who responds to you. You can even leverage some sort of like LinkedIn, LinkedIn networking tool. I think there's some tools like Tripify out there that helps you automate this process. You just need to pay like a monthly fee of 20-30 bucks, right? And depending on your search criteria, it will sort of help you automate the connection request to thousands of people. That may help you save some time. Okay. And referral, of course, is very important. But referral doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the job. So when you get an interview through referral, you still need to nail that. So making sure that you work on a lot of projects and you can explain those projects really, really well. So people have the confidence to hire you. So they know you can get the work done. Right? So preparation is also very important. Okay. So I'm gonna pause here and see if you guys have any questions. Feel free to ask. Does LinkedIn Easy Apply work at all? It definitely works. How well it works, I honestly, I don't know. I think, on LinkedIn, one way is just to try the Easy Apply, but lots of people will do that. right? You still need to try to, job search is a lot of work. If you know a company is working, the good thing about LinkedIn is that if you know the company is hiring, right, you apply for the job first. Even when we do internal referral, right, we'll refer the candidates and students to the hiring manager, but hiring manager will usually ask you, say, hey, don't forget to ask your students to apply for the job on LinkedIn or on a company's website, because they will need to make sure that you're actually in their system, right? Because HR will follow uh, a procedure. They will need to make sure that the profile is actually in their database, right? So that you don't expect the hiring manager to ask, HR to manually input your information. So they always give you a link and ask you to apply. So apply, just keep applying for sure. But on LinkedIn, look at the company's profile and look for the data hiring manager and see if you can make an introduction. And that's important, right? And sometimes people don't respond to you. That's fine. I would say most of the time. But can you I think there are different strategies on LinkedIn. Like you can like their posts, right? You can send some messages, make comments, just so that when they actually see your resume, they may actually remember you. But that takes a lot of effort, of course. Is two-column resume accepted? I heard ATS doesn't pick it up. I think most of the ATS systems should be smart enough to pick up two-column style resume, but that's one of the reasons why I still recommend the traditional row-based, just like one-column resume, just to avoid this issue. But when people actually look at it, it usually looks better, right, from a layout perspective. But yeah, it's not hard to parse the two-column resume. I would definitely write the template myself instead of using an online resume generation tool, because they tend to use a lot of tables, and that's and it could be very nested tables, and sometimes it's very hard to parse in that case. Yep. So apply first and reach out. I would agree with this approach. Thanks, Lawrence, for sharing the launchclub.com site for networking. That's a good suggestion. When you do, I think cover letter will be useful when you're doing, the outreach yourself, right? You don't necessarily always send the resume to people, but it doesn't have to be like a cover letter in a PDF format. It's really like your LinkedIn intro is your cover letter, right? Or your blog post is your cover letter. So, spend some time on that. I think it will definitely be useful. Okay. When you actually start to get interviews, and you need to prepare for interviews. So that's the time when you're going to do a lot of preparation. We need to read the job postings many times, try to understand what the company, the type of candidates the company are looking for. Um, One suggestion I have is that usually you start by having a conversation with HR or hiring a manager sometimes. So that's the time you're going to ask a lot of questions, right? Try to understand how big the team is, right? Who is the hiring manager, um, and what the team is looking for. HR doesn't always have the best answer, but try to get as much as possible out of the conversation with the HR. That helps you do you know preparation better, right? I recommend reaching out to hiring managers and hiring directors and the senior data scientist on that team, if you can figure out which team or which company it is, and just try to read through their activities. And sometimes they share things about their teams and the conferences that they attend, that sort of help you understand the technology they use internally. Definitely try to read their tech blog, right? A lot of the big tech companies has tech blogs. Even smaller companies, you go to companies' website, read their blog posts, and that tells you what they do. If it's startup that has some sort of SaaS platform or services, you absolutely have to read their blog post, right? Try to understand their product features, their way of thinking about, their product solutions. All of these will help you with the interview. Okay. And when you read the job description, they mention, a lot of keywords, maybe agile project management. It doesn't mean that you have to have a PMP certification. Like you don't have to come from a project management background. But showing that you have worked in a team is important, right? There are, many different ways to practice agile. But and typically when you work in an agile team, you're going to do some sort of like, sprint planning, right? Whether it's 1 week or 2 week, you're going to plan ahead what you're going to do, right? The project managers will be in meeting as well. And that's why showing like, that your interaction with the business is very important, right? And then you have daily stand-up meeting. At the end of the sprint, you're going to do a review session, right? Um, when you, I would recommend working on some group project. See if you can find some friends or people who are learning at the same time to work on some group project and see if you can practice this as well, right? Segmentation, predictive modeling, machine learning. These are the things that companies will mention on their resume, and try to come up with interview questions for yourself, right? You need to sort of know, like before you go to any interviews, right? Try to come up with 10 interview questions based on the job description, based on everything you've learned about this company, and use that for mock interview preparation. Okay. One of some of the, so I'm not going to go through all of these questions. This will be shared on YouTube later, so you can check them out. One of the very good interview question our students have received, is that the company will actually just give a screenshot of their product, right? And then they ask the student to come up with 3 machine learning use cases. Yeah, if of this product. So that requires the student to sort of just look at the screenshot of their product and try to understand the use cases, right? And it's let's say B2B business, SaaS software. And then you need to understand that how does SaaS work? You need to do your research, right? What are some of the challenges when they're trying to sell their SaaS product? But it's end of the day, it's all about how do we find the right customer, enterprises to sell our product to? Are there any data we can collect when they start to do, a pilot, or when the people start to have a trial of the product? Because they're trying to collect as much data as possible, try to understand the user behavior. And then you can build predictive models to predict who's more likely to sign up. Or for your existing client, who's more likely to renew? Because for any kind of SaaS product, company, being able to successfully renew the contract, right, is way more efficient and cost saving and more profitable than acquiring a new customer, right? So if you have never worked in SaaS company, how do you know about these? Well, you have to read use cases. For example, I think maybe you can talk to ChatGPT and ask about it. Maybe it'll give you some good answer. But on Google, I would definitely Google keywords like machine learning use cases for SaaS companies, right? Or maybe you can read Deloitte's white paper. They definitely have some sort of solution, related blogs, because that's the business they are in. They're trying to sell their consulting services to many different types of businesses. They definitely have industry solution related white paper, right? Okay. A typical interview process involves a phone screening, right? Technical screening, which means you probably need to do some sort of lead code or Python SQL test. Machine learning is usually at a later stage, right? After you talk to the hiring manager in the second round, which is technical. Whether it's remote or on-site, they will decide if they would like to move you to the next round. So they'll give you a take-home assignment and ask you to complete, some sort of data analytics or data science mini project and submit the solution within 3 days. And they also sometimes ask you to prepare a presentation, right? And then you get interviewed by the team or by the senior leaders. Different companies will have different approaches, because with some companies, during the same day, you might be interviewing with everybody, right? It's a series of meeting like at Amazon, but sometimes you get to choose like over a couple of days, right? You can finish your interview. So you might be talking with the head of, technology first before you actually talk to the team. So, how they actually conduct the interviews, I think it depends on the company, but in general, right? you'll be talking to someone from HR or a recruiter, right? They want to make sure that expectation aligns on both sides, right? Salary expectations or your experience. The company wants to know if you have the right experience, education background, right? They want to make sure that absolutely there's nothing wrong with this candidate before, otherwise it will be waste of hiring manager's time, right? But this is an opportunity for you to assess, right, if this is the right company for you to even have and consider an interview with, right? And then you talk to the hiring manager. They want to make sure that the interview covers most of the important questions and you basically meet the basic requirements, and then you move on to the next round, right? The technical interview can happen before you talk to the hiring manager. For most companies, this is more efficient because if you are not even skilled, they probably don't want to waste hiring managers' time. But for some companies, actually, you'll do that later because if you're an experienced candidate, right, they may actually have a chat with you first and then send you some test. But I think I see like most of the time, you're probably going to do a test first. Otherwise, the hiring managers will be pretty overwhelmed with all kinds of interviews. Take-home assignment is absolutely critical. We start to see more and more. I think after ChatGPT become popular, right? People can easily cheat. So you'll start to see more live pair programming type of interviews. So for software engineering, it could be just live pair programming, right? They give you a problem, ask you to do coding, and then they can ask you questions along the way. That could be pretty nerve-wracking. Another type of live interview would be just ask you to share the screen, right, and do a code review, right? You can demonstrate your portfolio project and go through the code. They would like to ask you question line, like go through each line and ask you, by asking you a couple of questions, they pretty much know if you created this project, right? And some companies will prefer you to do a summary of what you've done and you present that. And then they ask you a question along the way. So definitely they will be able to tell if you did the work, right? And so be prepared for that. And I think all the portfolio projects you've done, it will get you prepared for that because without working on multiple portfolio projects, I think if you get a take-home assignment, it's going to take you a lot of time. But if you're sort of used to that, you've done that a couple of times, you have some boilerplate code already, it will be fairly quick for you to complete a take-home assignment. Even though I'm sort of against this, but this is indeed a better way to interview. But the challenging part from a job seeker's perspective is that sometimes you get multiple interviews and you have to do multiple take-home assignments. And if you also have a full-time job, this is so much worse. But this is what it takes to become a data scientist nowadays, I think. All right. Oh, so this is the example, a company giving you a screenshot of their product, and they want you to sort of just observe this and try to understand their business model, and then come up with 3 suggestions for machine learning use cases. I think this is a really good, question. And there's the typical, data science challenge, and you'll find a ton of examples online, like the Facebook ads challenge, and they'll give you a data set to do A/B testing and things like that. Okay, and then the on-site interview questions, companies may ask you things about SQL, right, machine learning. We don't have time to go through all of these. My recommendation here is that students always ask us like, okay, so how much time I should spend on mathematics, statistics, and machine learning algorithms, right? I would say unless it's a machine learning scientist job, right? Companies typically don't ask you just to explain how the algorithm work or how you're not going to get a lot of questions asking you to explain the formula. I'd rather understand, like, ask questions like, do you understand the difference, right? Or pros and cons between random forest and XGBoost. Instead of asking like how you optimize or XGBoost work under the hood, most of the data scientists work on applied problems. So you're still just like doing tunings and working with packages, right? You're not the one who's writing the XGBoost algorithm. So understanding how to use it, right, in a practical scenario is actually way more useful. So in this case, just whatever algorithms you've applied in your machine learning project, I think you're always going to try a bunch of algorithms, right? You just need to understand like when is a good use case for linear regression, and what's the downside of linear regression. For example, if you work with linear models, right, it has some sort of linear assumption and you have to do a lot of feature engineering. It doesn't work very well with missing values, right? And you have to do more feature transformations compared to, and it doesn't work with, skewed distributions very well. And that sort of means you have to do feature transformation. And decision tree is probably less effort on the feature engineering side, right? But linear models are easier to explain. That's why in the banking industry, they still keep using linear models, right? So you need to understand the pros and cons and the use cases of these models, because when you actually start to use it, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty couple of lines of code. It's not like writing a software, right? So understanding the use case, pros and cons of these algorithms are more important than spending more time on explaining how it works on the hood. But if you understand how it works on the hood, that would be great, because I think that's part of the thing, effort you spend on learning machine learning, right? And I would say Python and SQL are probably more important, because if you can't pass the Python test, then you're not even going to move on to the next round, right? So here are my summary. I think switching to data industry is actually not easy nowadays. It used to be pretty straightforward as long as you have like Python, Spark skills, right? You absolutely need to do a lot of research. Research about the industry, research about the company, research about this job position, and about the team, right? Hiring managers, hiring directors. If you're just getting started, try to follow a structured curriculum, right? And you can enroll in programs or courses, whether it's online courses. So once you have a very structured curriculum, you just need to figure out which course to take. And doing self-learning, as long as you stay on the right track and you can stick to it, you will definitely become successful, right? Find a mentor or someone who can give you guidance along the way. Whether it's for interviews or for just learning purpose, I think giving the feedback is important. So okay, am I doing this in the right way? Because it feels like, going through this online course, I copy and paste the code, I can get it to work. But is this how people do that in practice, right? Is there anything I can improve in my code, in my notebook? And those are some kind of, feedback you're looking for, right? And absolutely need to spend more time on the portfolio project building, because that's all of your talking points in interviews. And that also decides whether you're going to get interviews. I'm assuming that you're switching career, right? So portfolio project becomes very important. And you'll definitely tailor your resume, right? It's not necessary to tailor your resume for every job you apply for. It's going to be too much work. You should always have a generic version. And those jobs you would like to do easy apply, I think use a generic version. But if there are companies and positions that you're really interested in, I think you need to spend a little bit of time doing tailoring. So whether it's tailoring the key skills, right, removing some unnecessary ones, and adding the relevant keywords, right? And apply for more jobs. It's a tough market at the moment, but I think maybe in 6 months will be a lot better. So it's the time for us to just get prepared, upskill ourselves, and just keep applying for jobs, and then you will get interviews. Job search takes a lot of patience, and sometimes it could be, you could be discouraged. That's why you need to talk to people and get feedback. And the most important thing is try to understand what's not working and try to understand what can be improved. So having someone who's more experienced to work with you will definitely be helpful. And keep learning. So I think you can go down the data analytics path and later on become a data scientist, or maybe you're in the process of applying for data science jobs already, right? But don't stop learning. I know job search is a lot of effort, but this is time where you actually, while you're applying for jobs, keep learning more about data engineering, or machine learning engineering. And some of these, skill set if you add them to the resume, it will help you as well. And it's going to help your career, in general. So should definitely keep learning. Okay. All right. So I think we're at the end of this presentation. And just to give a shout out to WeCloudData's Data Science Full-Time Bootcamp. If you're interested in learning learning data science with WeCloud, I think we have one of the best programs because we have the real client projects that you can use to fill the experience gap. And you get to work with real client on real projects, and you'll be able to put everything you've learned, to action. And we have a part-time option as well if you have a full-time job right now. Okay, so we're at the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll be around for a bit longer. So I'll try my best to address all of your questions. Yes, happy job hunting, everyone. We had 3 offers come in last week. So I maybe the job market is picking up a little bit. We're start to hear students getting more interviews. I think last fall, especially like November, December, it was pretty tough. I think January wasn't very good. But somehow I think in February, we start to hear more students getting interviews and getting offers. So definitely, just buckle up, and I hope everyone good luck. If you would like to have a chat, I'll leave you my contact information. This is my email. Oh, forgot to mention something. If you're just learning data science and you're just getting started, we have a data science career guide. It has a lot more detail than what I presented today. I'll share the link with you. So go check it out. I talk about the job market and also share a lot more details about how to build a portfolio project. There's some past recordings that you can find as well. Yeah, so each one of these videos are like an hour-long video, and it has a lot of details discussing how to build your personal project, blogs, presentation, how to choose topics. So I hope these can be useful. I have some sample project, the workflow diagrams. Yeah, look into it. I hope that's useful. And definitely connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Okay, looks like there's no more question. So in that case, I will end this meeting, and I hope you guys have a great weekend.